Christ descend from David, yet David still call him Lord? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Matthew on walking through the Bible.
The glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Matthew chapter 22. We're going to be reading from verses 41 to 46. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Matthew chapter 22, beginning at verse 41. While the Pharisees were gathered together, Jesus asked them, saying, "What do you think about the Christ? Whose son is he?" They said to him, "The son of David." He said to them, "How then does David in the Spirit call him Lord, saying, 'The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool'? If David then calls him Lord, how is he his son?" And no one was able to answer him a word, nor from that day on did anyone dare question him anymore. For the majority of chapter 22, the Pharisees and Sadducees have been posing Jesus questions that they thought would trap him into saying something that would prove he wasn't a prophet from God, and when they did so, they would discredit him among the people and then arrest him. The Pharisees asked about paying taxes to Caesar, and Jesus said that because Caesar's image is on their coins, they need to render the things that are Caesar's to Caesar, and at the same time render to God the things that are God's. The Sadducees then asked about a woman who through Jewish levirate marriage had 7 husbands, trying to disprove the resurrection, to which Jesus replied, in the resurrection there would be no marriage, and what's more, God is the God of the living, not the dead. So since he is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, then their spirits must still be alive and awaiting the resurrection. Then in the last episode, the Pharisees asked which was the greatest commandment in the law, seeking to show that Jesus favored parts of God's law over other parts. Jesus answered by saying that you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and your neighbor as yourself, for the entire law and prophets hang on those 2 commandments. With those tricky questions now answered, Jesus turned to a question of his own that he wanted to pose to the Pharisees. The reason he asked this question is because the Pharisees didn't believe that Jesus was the Christ, the Son of God, but merely pretended to think that he was a good man for the sake of the people. He turned their attention to a passage in Psalms 110, verse 1, which reads, "The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool." David is the writer of this psalm, and the topic of the psalm is about the Messiah's reign. Jesus' question to them is, if David calls the Messiah Lord, how can the Messiah be called his son? It was plainly obvious from the Old Testament that the Messiah would come from the house of David, for 2 Samuel 7, verses 12 and 13 says so. So the Messiah would be the son of David, that is, his descendants. Under a normal circumstance, the son is never called Lord by his father. The father would be called Lord by the son. So how is it that David would call his son Lord? The point Jesus is making is about his divinity. Jesus is the son of David. That was not in dispute. However, not all sons of David are the Messiah, for Solomon, Josiah, and Zerubbabel in the Old Testament were all sons of David, yet not the Messiah. Jesus, however, claimed not only to be the son of David, but to also be the son of God, God himself. That is what the Pharisees didn't believe, for in John 10:33, listen to what the Jews said. The Jews answered, saying, "For a good work we do not stone you, but for blasphemy, and because you, being a man, make yourself God." That the Messiah was to be God has been a stumbling block for the Jews, not only of that day, but of this day as well, for they see Deuteronomy 6 verse 4 as saying that there is only one person of the Godhead, instead of recognizing that one in that passage is not speaking of one person, but is speaking about the unity of God when compared to the many gods of the Canaanites in whose land they were about to enter. But getting back to Jesus' question, Psalms 110 verse 1 is a problem if you believe that the Messiah isn't to be God, for why would David then call him Lord? The first Lord in that passage is obviously God, in this case God the Father, but the second Lord in that passage is also God, the Messiah, for that is who this psalm is about. Jesus is saying that he is the second Lord spoken of in Psalms 110, for he is the son of David, fulfilling Old Testament prophecy about the Messiah, but he is also the son of God, deity, fulfilling the prophecy found in Psalms 110. Only one who is the son of David and the son of God could be the Messiah, for if he was simply a man only, he could not be the Messiah. Nobody in the crowd was able to answer him a word because they either didn't understand the passage or they did understand but didn't want to admit the consequences of it, for they didn't believe it. After that, nobody of the Pharisees and Sadducees dare ask him any more questions. The next time we'll see the Pharisees specifically mentioned in the book of Matthew is at Jesus' crucifixion, which by now was just 3 days away. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Matthew 23, verses 1 to 12, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
I'm not a...
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.
Of his cross.